Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al-Arabiya headquarters with a special programme on Syria. The country's new leader, Ahmed Al-Sharaa, has given a wide-ranging interview to the network where he discussed and outlined many critical issues, including the length of the transition period in Syria and regional security. These are our top headlines. In an exclusive interview, Syria's new leader tells Al-Arabiya elections will be in 4 years. Rebuilding relationships across Syria is also top priority for the new leader as he confirms talks with the SDF to resolve the crisis in the northeast. And Al-Sharaa praises support from Saudi Arabia, saying the kingdom has major investment opportunities in the country. Welcome to the show. Speaking exclusively to Al-Arabiya in Damascus, Syrian leader Ahmed Al-Sharaa discusses in detail what's next for the war-torn country, from its relations with the US and Iran to holding legitimate elections. We begin with the latter, which its leader says could be organized in 4 years' time. Al-Sharaa also said that a population census is crucial before the country's new leaders can be elected.
The process of conducting a population census in Syria requires time, as does the legal communication with Syrian communities abroad through embassies and the redocumentation of new births and past deaths. For instance, someone who left the country at the age of 10 is now 24 years old. We are dealing with a very broad situation that demands precise accounting of all Syrians, whether they are inside the country or in the diaspora. This matter requires time. Is it possible that the elections could happen in 4 years? It's possible.
Meanwhile, Al-Sharaa is warning that a quota system would undermine the Syrian state and adds that the next stage will involve an interim government made up of qualified individuals.
This is a Syrian problem. Let us solve it. Syrian to Syrian. We are trying to find a suitable solution for the situation in northeastern Syria based on fundamental principles. There must be no division of Syria, and we must not entrench the idea of division in any form, even in a federal form. Our society is not yet ready to understand the nature of federal systems.
The new Syrian leader also says that the Kurds are an integral part of the Syrian fabric and that protecting them is the responsibility and the priority of the state. He adds that qualified armed Kurds will be included in the ranks of the Ministry of Defense.
The Kurds are part of our people, and they have been wronged just like us. It's our duty to protect and support them, and to return them to some of the villages they were displaced from during the revolution. This is our responsibility. Based on these principles, those armed in northeastern Syria, the Ministry of Defense should also ensure that weapons are exclusively under state control. For those who are armed and qualified to join the Ministry of Defense, we welcome them into its ranks. Under these conditions and regulations, we are open to a negotiation path with the SDF.
For more on this, I'm joined by Sir William Patey, the former British ambassador to Iraq, who has extensive first-hand experience witnessing part of the country's transition period after the fall of Saddam Hussein. Sir William, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. Firstly, what do you make of the new Syrian leader suggesting the country's first election since Assad's downfall may be in 4 years' time?
I think that's a reflection of the reality. You have a country that's been completely destroyed by the Assad regime, and it's going to take time to rebuild. I was very struck by the new leader's words. He's saying all the right things. I think it would take one of the problems is we often rush to have elections without having made all the right preparations, having a decent constitution and preparation for elections, allowing the Syrian diaspora to return and take part in these elections. So the important thing is to maintain a decent government and build the institutions.
Do you think there's any risk in this timeline, this 4-year timeline? As you said, it's all about, bringing the fabric back together, rebuilding.
Well, there obviously is a risk, and if he doesn't mean what he says, then he'll be in a position to consolidate power amongst a smaller group. But the intention to dissolve the Hayat Tahrir al-Shams, the revolutionary organization which he headed, is a good sign. Appointing ministers not based on sectarianism or factionalism is also a good sign. What they need to do is to create a legal system, allow freedom of the press, build up an armed forces that is answerable to the government, avoid mistakes of other countries where armed militias were able to exercise political influence well beyond democratic elections.
So you've actually brought me to my next question about other countries. You have extensive experience in both Iraq and Afghanistan, witnessing state building and transitions in these real complex environments. What are the biggest challenges ahead, in your view, for Syria?
Well, I think Syria is in an even more difficult position than Afghanistan, say, or Iraq, because there are many more external players, each with interests that could contradict. Russia will want to protect its military interests. Iran will want to protect its ability to resupply Hezbollah. Turkey will want to make sure that the Kurds in the northeast do not become a threat to them. And the Americans will want to ensure that their allies in the northeast, the SDF, are able to continue to suppress Daesh or ISIS. So there are lots of countries with different interests. I know that the Gulf countries will be suspicious of Islamist governments, but they need to work closely with Turkey to build up, give the Syrians some quick wins, rebuild the hospitals, rebuild the schools, get some of the institutions up and running, and avoid just pursuing their narrow regional interests. Now, that's easier said than done, but I think engagement with the new regime is absolutely vital for the Americans, for the European Union, for Britain and regional states.
Do you think that the tone that has been struck in this interview by Al-Sharaa will actually make the countries feel more confident in him going forward? As you said, there could be suspicion about his governance, but it seems to be that he is striking a somewhat, democratic tone. He wants to rebuild. He wants change.
There'll be a lot of skepticism, given his background, where he came from, a member of Jabhat al-Nusra. He was associated with Al-Qaeda, so there will be skepticism there. But whoever his PR firm is, they deserve huge credit because he's saying all the right things. But I think countries will judge him and his allies by what they do, not necessarily by what they say. They're certainly saying all the right things. And we see, as a result of that, the American government lifting the bounty on his head, the British government and other governments engaging with this new government, interim government in Damascus. And that's all a good sign.
Let's just talk about the US. They still have sanctions imposed on Syria from the Assad era. Under what conditions could they remove these, in your view, and how long could it possibly take?
Well, I think sanctions should begin to be lifted on the Syrian government as they roll out their transition program. As you say, the sanctions were imposed on an Assad regime that is no longer there. Therefore, the justification for the sanctions no longer there. Obviously, Ahmed al-Sharaa brings some baggage with him, given his former affiliations. But the US have already lifted the $10 million bounty on his head. I think as he begins to implement the plan they have laid out, that would be the sign to very quickly start lifting sanctions.
So one of the key remaining issues, you actually touched on it a little bit earlier, is to unite Syria and the future of the Syrian democratic forces in the country's northeast. They want governance in those regions, but Al-Sharaa in the interview has ruled out any divisions, and he's really calling for unity across the country. Do you think the SDF will comply?
Well, that's a tricky one. I think they will want to. They will take advice from their American allies. I don't think they could survive without the American allies. I don't think the Syrians want to have a situation in Iraq where you have an autonomous Kurdish region. You can give a devolved government to governors. You could create regional autonomies or regional governance without dividing the country. And it will be important that the SDF are represented in, and the Kurds more broadly are represented in any government in Damascus. But it's important to learn lessons where governments have been formed entirely on a factional or sectarian basis, and the spoils have been divided on this basis. What they need is the rule of law for everyone, a system that everyone can rely on, that there's a legal system that will give them justice, and that they will have access to resources, and they will play their part in rebuilding Syria. And the 3 million Syrian refugees, they're going to have a huge role to play as well.
So, William Patey, the former British ambassador to Iraq, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Let's turn our attention to Syria's relationship with Arab and Gulf countries. The Syrian leader points out that the latest events spared a major regional war, calling the current stage in Syria historic. Al-Sharaa says Israel had planned to enter Syria, which would have led to Iran's involvement, dragging in Iraq and then also Turkey.
My assessment of this phase is that it marks a significant historical turning point in the region. The area was on the verge of a large-scale regional war. There was talk of Israeli intervention in the region and in Syria, with claims that it would be the largest war following Gaza and Lebanon. This was a real possibility, because if Israeli forces had entered Syria, it would have inevitably prompted the Iranians to involve Iraq in countering this advance. Consequently, Turkey, feeling deeply concerned about the Israeli advance, would likely take positions, in my view, against the Israelis and aligned with the Iranians. This situation would undoubtedly be exploited by Russia to divert attention from the war in Ukraine, leading to inevitable American reactions.
Now he stresses that the swift war to topple the Assad regime secured the region and the Gulf states for the next 50 years.
The swift war ensured the security of the entire region from these potential threats and fundamentally secured the Gulf's safety for the next 50 years. It also safeguarded Turkey's national security, Syria's national security primarily, and the security of the region as a whole.
Al-Sharaa has also indicated that Saudi Arabia is seeking stability in Syria. He adds that the kingdom has a major role in the future of the country.
The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is striving to bring stability to Syria. They will also be partners in the developmental efforts we are pursuing. While Syria is indeed a devastated country, it also represents a significant investment opportunity for all neighboring countries capable of implementing strategic projects with substantial returns that will benefit these nations. I am proud of everything they have done so far. Delegations came to us to pave the way for starting new relations and building balanced strategic partnerships with Saudi Arabia.
And I'm pleased to say joining us now is the chairman of the Gulf Research Centre, Dr. Abdulaziz Saqr. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening to you. Very pleased to be here with you tonight.
Thank you. Yes. So, first of all, what did you make of Ahmed Al-Sharaa's statements as one of the most prominent strategists in the region yourself?
Well, first, I must admit I was very pleased with the way how he answered some of the tough questions that Al-Arabiya journalist Tahir Baraka put him through. He really interrogated him with all the questions and the tough questions that it may not have all the answer at this stage. But however, he came out quite calm, precise and structural in his answers. And so I think the biggest concern in the region, Saudi Arabia and the rest of the country, will be the safety and security of Syria inside. How to get the different actors together, how to have an inclusive policy together to bring all the Syrian different players and parties together. As you know, Saudi Arabia in 2015 and 2017 have hosted the Syrian opposition conference in Riyadh, and that have led to Riyadh declaration, which really set the ground correctly for all the Syrian opposition of how do we wish and how do we see the future of the Syrian in precise. Yes, he came out and he talked about the development and the requirement. He talked about his childhood in Saudi Arabia and the way how he saw it when he was a young child. He talked about the relation and the necessity of going through constitution and state building, which is all highly appreciated and it's all very much welcomed. I think he did receive enough and good endorsement as of today by the big neighboring country and also by the international power. We are at a monitoring stage now to see and monitor how things will progress there. We hope and we will, that the Syrian people will respond positively to all the things that he said, and we hope he will be able to get the big conference that he promised. For all to have an inclusive of all the Syrian inside and outside, to talk about the future of Syria, whether it's a constitution, state building, relation of the neighborhood, relation of the external power that exists in Syria, like Russia and the other, the economic development, to treat the suffering of the people. They went through 50 years of a tough life in Syria. We all sympathize with them.
As Al-Sharaa said, that liberating Syria ensures the security of the region, the Gulf and Syria, for the next 50 years. What do you make of these comments?
I think he meant that Iran presence by using sectarianism as a tools of regional expansion and by endorsing certain militia, because Iran always wanted to deal with militia, but not with the state as a state. I think today they have a chance, honestly, in Iran to come out and say, as Assad used to say, or they used to say, we have been in Syria because we were invited and we were asked by the Syrian regime. Today, the Syrian regime is no longer there. So it's better they come out clearly and said, listen, we're no longer needed there, at least to have a safe facing device in a way, to leave some margin for a future reasonable relation to the Arab country. As he said, with no interventionist policy, with no imposing of any sort of ideology to the people in the Arab world and in Syria in particular. So if Syria settled today, if we are sure that the Iranian presence has been eliminated and out of Syria today, the rest of the country can enjoy a better, peaceful and security in the region, as there's nobody using sectarianism as a dimension, supporting militia and expansionist policy in the region.
Many observers have noticed with which speed the governments of the region responded to Al-Sharaa just days after he took control of that situation in Syria. We all know that some of these governments were suspicious of parties that could possibly have succeeded Assad. If you could explain to us why there was such a change regarding this situation. Was it a principle basis? Did you think that Al-Sharaa was probably the right man to make this change in Syria, in your opinion?
Well, first, we were all happy to see Assad is out and the Syrian people at least feel the freedom from such brutal regime that have really suppressed them for 50 years and so. Al-Sharaa, I think he came out quite clear in a lot of his statement. He addresses the subject quite clearly. I think he did speed up the release of the prisoner and opening the jails and release people from that one, and that more than 50,000 people, they were still inside there. I think he sent a clear indication of normalizing a good relation to the neighboring country, which is very important. He sent a clear signal of his future plan, which include, as I say, the constitution and the inclusive policy of all parties. He did talk about the Kurd, Casin in Syria, and he also talked about a good neighborhood with countries like Lebanon, Jordan, Syria. So all the positive messages that he have sent, it did give a good indication, and it gave a very positive signal to the neighboring country to send their ministers or special delegation, to meet, to ensure what he have said is going to be implemented, and to also ensure that we want to see safety and security, because you can't move toward development and reconstruction and rebuilding Syria if there is no safety and security. So first you have to bring safety and security. And to achieve that, you're going to need the consensus of the people, you're going to need the people's support and endorsement of such things, and you're going to need a proper steps that he takes to ensure certain things.
So I just want to ask one thing. When we're looking at Saudi Arabia, will they be looking to invest in Syria to ensure things like security in the country and development? What do you think the future plans are?
You know, the Israelis have destroyed, unfortunately, most of the Syrian military capability. But so I think what is required now is to ensure building up a security, internal security capability to make sure that all the different provinces from the north and south and east and west, are secured, and there is a good law and order. So policing, Coast Guard, domestic security to ensure a good judiciary system to be implemented. People, they need to feel they will not be taking for, like what they used to do with them before with the Assad regime. But at least, there is a good judiciary system, there is a good law to be implemented, and there is a personal safety. This will ensure the return of all this, people that they were forced to go to Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Egypt, Turkey, and all these places, the return of these people. But yet, to have the return of these people, they need a lot of special preparation also to be able to welcome them back.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, and also Happy New Year to you. Thank you for your insights. Thank you. I really appreciate it. That was the chairman of the Gulf Research Center, Dr. Abdulaziz Saqr.
Thank you.
With regards to his group's activity in Syria and across the region, this was Al-Sharaa's response.
What happened today was that there was a disease that lingered in the Arab countries for 40 years and was removed in just 11 days. We did not enter Tehran, nor did we go to southern Lebanon. We entered our own villages and towns. Therefore, when some talk about conflict or similar terms, the reality is that we never entered Tehran. These are our villages, provinces, and towns that were destroyed over the heads of their inhabitants.
Meanwhile, he also says that the project to export the Iranian Revolution under the banner of resistance has significantly harmed the region. He highlights its role in fueling sectarian strife, triggering civil wars, and fostering widespread corruption.
The project of exporting the Iranian Revolution to Arab countries under the pretext of using Palestine and relying on a specific sect has had a significant impact on the region. In every place the Iranians have entered, or where the Iranian project has taken root, such as Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria, it has consistently exhibited similar characteristics. First, the region experiences intense sectarian strife, often leading to civil wars. Second, there is widespread administrative corruption at the level of government and public institutions. Third, it coincides with the large-scale production and spread of Captagon and other drugs in the region. Damascus, once the cradle of ancient civilization and heritage, has now become the world's largest producer of Captagon, exporting it to countries all over the world.
Meanwhile, Al-Sharaa also stressed that Iran must not use Syria as a platform to attack other countries.
We strive to calm tensions and build balanced and strategic relationships as much as possible. There is a wound among the Syrian people caused by Iran, and we need considerable time for these wounds to heal. Most importantly, Iran must not consider using Syria as a platform to attack or disrupt other countries again. We have fulfilled our duty as a state by protecting their embassy and safeguarding sites. And the religious shrines? Yes, and the religious shrines that concern them, to prevent any provocations or similar incidents. This is our duty as a state toward another state. I expected them to appreciate this and to issue positive statements toward the Syrian people and society. They should have chosen to stand with the people because, in the end, the people will prevail no matter what. Instead, they aligned themselves with a regime that has oppressed these people.
Now let's turn our attention to Syria's relationship with the whole world. Syria's new leaders are seeking bigger and better international relations following the fall of the Assad regime. Al-Sharaa has focused greatly on reconstruction and economic development, saying on numerous occasions that Syria is not interested in another war. One factor looming over these efforts is Al-Sharaa's group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, which has been designated as a terror organization by the likes of the US and the UK. For the first time, while speaking exclusively to Al Arabiya, Al-Sharaa has confirmed that the dissolution of HTS will be announced at the National Dialogue Conference. He says the event will be inclusive, representing all segments of society, with a voting system to decide sensitive issues.
Will you dissolve HTS? Certainly, running a state cannot be done with the mindset of factions and groups. Since we were in Idlib, we were mentally and emotionally prepared for this. But the right opportunity never presented itself. The opportunity to govern is the best chance to dissolve HTS, and we would be the first to support this dissolution. When do you think this might happen? I believe it will happen during the conference. At the National Dialogue Conference, there will be an official announcement about it. That's quite a surprise. I think this is exclusive news for you, exclusive for Al Arabiya.
For more on this, I'm joined from Istanbul by Mesut Hakki Joshin, a professor of international law and was a member of the Turkish President's Security and Foreign Policy Board. Thank you so much for joining me this evening, Professor. Talks between the new Syrian government and the SDF are ongoing. What kind of expectations does Turkey have from these discussions at the moment?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much to give an opportunity to me what will happen about the new Syria. I have to, most importantly, we have to underline the Iran has lost influence in the region. Secondly, Russian army withdraw weapons and with personnel, and United States SATCOM troops continue to remain in the region, and Israel continues aggressive attacks and also occupation the Golan Heights. For Turkey, first of all, PKK-APG must lay down its arms and dismantle itself. Secondly, all countries must readmit ISIS, the military citizens, with their family members. The Syrian governments will determine Syrian citizens about these members of the terrorist organization, how they will integrate to the new Syrian government. However, Mr. Erdogan indicating today, Turkey cannot accept PKK-APG the terrorist organization operating in Syria. It is a threat against the Turkish territorial integrity. And they don't represent the Kurds in the region, and we must prevent ISIS taking advantage don't permit the Israel undermining new process in the Golan Heights. The also importance, the establishing new Syria in which all ethnic religious groups live side by side in peace, ensuring unity into the country, Mr. Erdogan said in today. When we're looking for myself, one is Turkey looking 5 important points. One is territorial integrity and independence, new Syria administration. Secondly, constitutional framework establishment with democratic elections as soon as, and normalizing public order and stability, and the coming back Syrian citizens to the country in safety mode. Well, almost 7 million people is outside. Another idea is humanitarian assistance with international community. We must work together, and Ankara is communicate with the EU and United Nations leaders, even though cooperation with the Muslim countries, the economic cooperation, re-establishment, the public order, and opening international, such as the airport, Laskia, Tartus, the harbors, and most important, the Turkey opened the new embassy for the establishment dialogue and also international system. For us, the Assad, the dictatorial regime was collapsed. Secondly, the torture and crimes end of these secret Palestinian services, they track the citizens of the Syrian people. These are very good news for the new year. And Al-Sharaa is also suspicious what will be the changes in Syria. I am hopeful the future of the Syria. I hope that according to international law, they will decide about their future in according to self-determination right.
You say that you're hopeful, and obviously we heard from Al-Sharaa earlier in the show saying it will be about 4 years until elections will be held. What do you think of this timeline?
Yes, for some people it's been a long time. However, when you're looking the states, the history, 61 years Assad regime and Baas was killed the people. The normalizing the country is not very easy. I'm hopeful about it. It's not long time. Will be quicker then. This depends on how can we establish the law order and even though justice in terms of the international system. I am hopeful we can do it with the Syrian people if they determine they can accomplish. Why? There is most important issue. There is freedom now. There is election of without any trade or the how can I say pressure by the Assad regime will be quicker than this 4 years. But I am again underline that if the Syrian people can decide it, and also if the international community, especially the Muslim countries, brotherhoods, such as just a moment ago, you talked with the Saudi Arabia governments, if we can assist on the economically and humanitarian side, this country is very rich, and Turkey is aimed to be a rich Syria and normalizing as soon as returning back to the international community.
So we've seen the new government's rhetoric towards both Turkey and Saudi Arabia. It's been very positive. Syria's new foreign minister is Turkish educated and making one of his first trips abroad to Saudi Arabia soon. Do you think we are witnessing the beginning of a new axis in the region? Things are beginning to shift.
Very good question. Thank you so much. I hope Turkey was stopped in the right time of the history and right side. So thank you so much to Saudi Arabia, the administration, to assist them, even though United Arab Emirates and Egyptians. We are Muslim, and we are beginning new century, and all the Muslim countries has to focus on what's happening in Israel and the threat. They occupied the Syria, even though they also every day attacking to the Syrian army, 80% weapons was out of order. I'm coming originally the Air Force. They don't have now the Air Force power capability. So Turkey and also Saudi Arabia and other countries is ready to assist them, first economically, even though establishing the normalizing relations, even though security side. Everybody have to be understood that Syria people not alone. The Turkish Brotherhood and Turkish military all the time ready to assist them to them. You remember that? Turkey from the 12 years assisted to 8 million people Syrian refugee in our country. And also Turkish military protect 8 million people in Idlib area. So we have to focus on all the praying countries, soldiers, which as soon as leave out, even though PKK, APG terrorist people. The secondly, we are ready to education, trade, transportation, and normalization public order, even though law mechanism, and also humanitarian assistance, because of the Syrian people, our brotherhood, believe thousands of years in the same country of the Mesopotamia. In this critical year, coming with the good news for the Syrian people, inshallah ta'ala, they will cooperate together their power without any conflict, no more civil war, no more kill the people in the jail.
Professor, thank you so much for joining us from Istanbul. It was a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much. Mesut, Hakki, Jashan there joining us. During the interview, Al-Sharaa urged the incoming Trump administration to lift sanctions on Syria, saying that they increase the burden on the Syrian people. Take a listen.
We emphasized an important issue, which is the sanctions imposed on Syria. These laws, such as the Caesar Act and others, were issued based on crimes committed by the regime against the victims, including us. Today, the victims are the ones who have overthrown this regime, so with the regime's removal, these sanctions should automatically be lifted. We hope the new U.S. administration will not follow the same approach as the previous one and will lift them without negotiations or compromises.
And to Russia, Al-Sharaa tells Arabiya that he seeks to maintain strategic relations. He adds that he does not want Russia to exit in a manner that undermines its relationship with Syria.
Russia is an important country and is also considered the second strongest country in the world. There are deep strategic interests between Syria and Russia. For instance, all Syrian weaponry is Russian. Many power stations are built with Russian expertise as well. Additionally, there are significant cultural ties between Syria and Russia. So, we do not want Russia to leave Syria in the way some may wish. I am confident that Syria is capable, has an independent character, and does not yield to pressure.
Now to a reminder of our top stories today. In an exclusive interview, Syria's new leader tells Al-Arabiya elections will be in 4 years. Rebuilding relationships across Syria is also top priority for the new leader as he confirms talks with the SDF to resolve the crisis in the northeast. And Al-Sharaa praises support from Saudi Arabia, saying the kingdom has major investment opportunities in the country. And that's all from us on W News this evening. Thank you for joining me. Riz Khan is coming up next. And don't miss Tom Burgess-Watson with GNT. Good night to you.